Please be seated.
In a world overflowing with competing loyalties, it's easy to give our hearts to things that promise much but deliver little. We must confront the idols that pull us away from the only one worthy of our worship, a God who isn't one of many, but one of one.
All right, let's kick off by remembering the passages that inspire this series. We'll kick off in Exodus 20. We'll read the first, 1 through the first half of 5. It reads like this: "And God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God." All right, this kicks off what we often refer to as the Ten Commandments. This is God laying out the law, and he kicks off with a reminder. I've done all this for you, right? I delivered you from Egypt. You're here because of me, and because of that, I am your only God. And along those lines, I'm the only one worthy of worship. Don't be making anything that you lend your worship to. And it should be intuitive, but anything man-made is not worthy of worship. If humans made it, it's not worthy of worship. And yet, all too often, we kind of mess that up. I like a story that Kyle Idleman tells, and ironically, his name is Idleman. I did not put that together until I was talking in first service, and I was like, oh, that's kind of ironic. So his name is Kyle Idleman. He's a preacher and an author, but he talks about a time where a friend of his was coming back from India and was so excited to tell him about the opportunities to share the gospel and to talk about Jesus with these people who didn't know Jesus. And he shows him a picture of a living room in India, and the image was sad because up on the hearth was an idol, and then every chair in the room was positioned not to be able to look at each other and talk to each other, but every chair in the room was positioned so that they could face the idol. And they laughed at this, and they talked about how sad it was because everything was oriented towards something that was never going to bring them fulfillment. And Kyle said, I thought how sad that was until I got to my own home. I sat down in my chair, I grabbed my remote, and then I looked at my hearth and realized everything in my living room was oriented towards my television, not towards each other, not so we could have a conversation. It was oriented towards this TV. And his living room probably looks like yours and mine. The idol that we're talking about today is the idol of screens. And they're more and more present in our lives, and we need to talk about how we can use them in a way that honors God. I do want to disarm you at the beginning. This is not going to be John and me telling you that technology is the devil. At the end of this, we're not going to tell you to throw your phone in the trash or ditch your TV or throw away your laptop. So much about technology is a blessing. I believe at their purest, screens are meant to bring us together. They're meant to help us connect to others. I was so grateful during COVID, the opportunity to be able to connect via screens on Zoom, to be able to connect with our teens and with the Pathfinders class. It would have been really hard without that. I'm really grateful that even right now we get to stream on YouTube, and whoever isn't able to worship with us today, if they're sick or if they're traveling, they can still stay connected with our church family. What a blessing that brings. Even just the blessing of technology to connect with grandparents. My kids can talk to their grandparents and see their face, which is so great. My grandparents lived a long ways away. I would talk to them maybe once a month, and we had physical distance, but also the distance of just talking to somebody on the phone is so different than being able to see their face. Right? Screens can be such a blessing whenever it comes to connection, and if we're using them that way, I think we're honoring God. So I hope that disarms you in some way, but also I hope you don't hear this and think, man, I really can't wait to pass this on to somebody else. Don't think that this sermon is for somebody else. There's something here for you as well. Screens, whether we realize it or not, are shaping us. And too often, I believe right now, screens are driving us apart. They're separating us. Screens are often driving us apart. If you watch a certain TV station, you're going to start using language like the liberal agenda. If you watch a different TV station, you're going to start using language like the conservative agenda. If you click on a certain article, your algorithm is just going to keep feeding you similar articles. And beyond our ability to even perceive it, technology ends up putting us in echo chambers where we only hear one side of the story. Imagine that. Technology isn't interested in you having a super well-rounded understanding of all things happening in the world. It's really just interested in retaining you on whatever website that you're on. One of the questions we have to ask as we think about our interactions with media and screens is, it's simple, but it's so good. Are our screens helping us love our neighbor as ourselves? And if they're not, we got to rethink the way that we're using our screens. If they're not helping us love our neighbor as ourselves, it's time to make some changes. You guys know the amount of time we spend on screens is incredible. The average American spends 6 hours and 40 minutes on screens per day. That's 46 hours plus a week. That's more than most people spend at their full-time job. If you're like me, my phone gives me a little guilt trip every Sunday morning. I don't know if this is every Sunday morning for everyone or if that's just when it schedules me to, help me focus during worship. But I get an alert that says, this is your screen time for the week. This is your average. And if you're like me, I can remember what some of that time was spent on, but often I'm like, what was the rest? I don't remember how I used that time. And I think it's because there's been a shift in how we use our screens and how we use technology. We're not using them for connection anymore. We're going to them more for amusement. Amusement. The word amusement, the root word, comes from the idea of the muses. Here's a picture of some Greek goddesses. I led at the beginning with no other gods before me. I'm not advocating for you to think about the Greek goddesses, okay? But this is where the concept comes from. And the muses were the Greek goddesses of thought, of reflection, of art, of science, right? Of great writing. They are the gods of thinking and reflection. If you add the prefix a or amusement, it is the lack of. So, what is amusement? It's the lack of reflection. It's the lack of thinking. We go to amusement so that we don't have to think. And screens increasingly are becoming a way to disengage, to separate. Is there a place for disengaging at times? Yes. Sometimes after a long day, you need to laugh. You need to throw on a sitcom. You need to disengage for a little bit. But if we're using 6 hours a day to disengage, then we have problems, right? That's not okay, right? That doesn't honor God. But if you're like me, we like to fill every empty moment with some kind of amusement. If you ever want to people watch, I enjoy people watching. I go to the fair to people watch. That's really the only reason I'm there. And to eat a turkey leg, which is like 50-50 on if it's going to be good. But it is like $18, which is outrageous. This is an aside, not important. So if you want to people watch, you can do that anytime you want at any checkout line. People are going to be in that checkout line for a whole 30 seconds, but they can't imagine spending that time waiting without filling it with something. And so rather than just stand there for 30 seconds in anticipation of being the next person, they have to scroll. So if you want to people watch, you can do it right there. They're not going to notice, right? We can't be away from it. We have to fill every second. Some people can't go to the bathroom without their phone. Some people can't eat dinner with their family without their phone. Some people, as soon as they walk into their home, they turn on the TV, not because they're planning to watch anything, but they just need the noise. They're not going to it with intent other than filling space. In a lot of ways, that becomes escapist behavior. We're distancing ourselves from others. And when we do that, we lose sight of the intent of those screens, the way that God would want us to use them. Again, what I said earlier, screens at their purest are meant to build connection. They're meant to connect us with others. Facebook was meant to connect us with others. Instagram was meant to connect us with others. Even the news was meant to help you understand what's happening in your community so that you could love your neighbor and take care of those around you, so you could be informed about what's going on in your community. But like most sin, what was intended for good, we are really good at taking a good thing and distorting it until it becomes harmful to us. Pornography is a distortion of God's good design for sexuality. Gluttony is a distortion of God's good design for provision. Gossip is a distortion of God's good design for interpersonal relationships. We're so good at taking something that was good for us and distorting it until it becomes harmful. The Pharisees were guilty of this. They distorted what was a good thing. We read the beginning of the giving of the law in those 10 Commandments. At Sinai, God gives the law, and the law is good. And the law often gets a bad rap, but this is where God invites people into relationship with him, and the purpose of the law was that connection with God. The law was not just a list of rules. The law was an invitation to be in relationship with God. It was an invitation to see the world the way that God sees the world. It also reminded us that we're not going to be able to accomplish all of this on our own. The law is a reminder that we need a Savior, but the law was a step in the direction of understanding who God is. But as humans, we distorted it. And Jesus, some of his strongest words are for the Pharisees whenever they've distorted the good law that God gave. The Pharisees fell in love with the law instead of the one to whom the law points, which is God. I'll say that again. The Pharisees loved the law instead of loving the one to whom the law points. That's God. And Jesus confronts them on this in Matthew 23. He's going to pronounce woes over them. That's not language we use anymore. Whenever you say woe to something, it's a lament. It's saying this is tragic. This is not how this should be. And Jesus says these. I'm going to read 3 of these. There's 7 in this section, but I think you'll get the gist of it. From Matthew 23, we'll read 23 to 28. He says, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give 1/10 of your spices, mint, dill, cumin. They are following the law even beyond what the law requires. They are trying to dot every I, cross every T. But you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You're doing the law, but you forgot the purpose of the law. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides. You strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel." Right? That's funny imagery. Jesus is funny. We don't always give him credit, but Jesus is funny. Verse 25, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence." Again, they are marking off the checklist of law, but they forgot the reason. "Blind Pharisees, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside also will be clean. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness." Jesus reminds the Pharisees that the law was never a checklist. It was never a to-do list. It was about relating to God. The law was an opportunity to love your neighbor and to see your neighbor as God sees them. It was an opportunity to be just like your just God. It revealed the heart of God, and then they were supposed to emulate it, but instead they just followed the rules without connecting to the God behind them. I wonder if Jesus were to pull us aside and have a sit-down moment with us and to talk about our screen usage, what would he say to us? I hope for many, and I know for many, he would pull you aside and say, "You knew these were for connection, and you're doing it. Thank you. Thank you for using this in a way that honors me and draws you closer to others." But also for some of us, including me, he would have some strong words. For some of us, he might use language like, "Woe to you. You use these devices that I give you for connection, but you use them to disconnect from the world." Or he might say, "Woe to you. You cannot put your phone down long enough to drive safely." Right? Jesus might say, "Woe to you. You consume media that makes you judge your neighbor instead of love your neighbor." He might say, Woe to you, you are so focused on being amused that you don't spend time in silence and in solitude and in reflection. What would Jesus say to you? I know that for me, he would give me some positives, and then he would have some critiques. Preparing a sermon on screens, it's awful, because the whole week in preparation, you become keenly aware of how many times you reach for your phone, and it is way more than I would like to admit. And every time I was like, oh, is this a good one or a bad one? Okay, I'm going to do something good first before I go look at my fantasy team, I'm guilty too often of filling gaps every time there's a gap with scrolling or with filling it with a podcast. I can be guilty of being the one who's with my children, but also mentally somewhere else as I check my phone and not giving them my presence like I should. I want to finish with a story before John is going to be our practical application person. But we can all relate to the desire to make changes whenever it comes to screens, but also the challenge that it can be to break patterns. And I just love this story because I think it highlights how hard it is to break those patterns. We were on the Pancha mission trip, and one of the kind of go-to spots in Pancha you have to eat at least once at Moonlight Pizza. We had a table of like 12 of us, 12 students, and one of the students declares phone stack, which if you don't know what that means, everybody stacks their phone in the middle of the table, and if you reach for your phone, then you have to buy dinner for everyone, which if you're in high school, you don't have enough money to buy dinner for everybody, so like very prohibited. About 5 minutes in, my side of the table having a great conversation, having fun, talking to each other, not looking at devices, able to talk to each other. But I look down at the other end, and the person who declared the phone stack is scrolling. And you're like, well, actually the first response, everyone was like, hey, free pizza, right? You're buying. And he was like, no, I can't do that. But we were like, why? And his response was, it wasn't very talkative down here, so I grabbed my phone. Right? It's always our escape. It's always the thing we can go to. It's our pattern. Right? It's our comfort. And so if we are going to make departures from our patterns, it has to be a conscious decision. It has to be intentional. We have to take some intentional steps in that direction, and that's what John is going to talk to us about.
Hey, church. For full disclosure, AI did help with this sermon. So if anything is funny or creative, it's all the computer. Just kidding. It did help out a little bit, but you'll know when it's coming, I promise. Something that we like to do in the youth Bible class, and adults, you can take this into your classes, is phone on the floor. You don't have to put your phone on the floor here. I think that would be disgusting. But I do want you to kind of disconnect from it. And so if you're on your phone, iPad, whatever, that can wait. You can watch this later on YouTube or email me for the slides. Just practice being disconnected for 15 minutes. Hulu and the football game can wait. Whatever it is, just kind of limit the distractions. And that's what we're ultimately talking about, right? That attention comes with a margin from distractions. I think it's really important to think about the law as this tool for connection or isolation. Isaiah talks about this in Isaiah 44, and it's really sobering about how even our pursuits, the technology that we create, can disconnect us from God or from the people around us. He says, all who make idols are no thing. Jeremy talked about this idea of worthlessness with idols. Isaiah says they don't even matter. They shouldn't even exist. And the things they treasure are worthless. Those who would speak up for them are blind. They are ignorant to their own shame. Who shapes a god and casts an idol, which can profit no thing? People who do that will be put to shame. Such craftsmen are only human beings. Let them all come together and take their stand. They will be brought down to terror and shame. Wow, he is spitting some verses, literally. And what he's saying is that these things that you've created really are tearing you apart, that you become more submissive to them than to God. And there's two postures that we can have to this, and I love the kind of contrast between the prophets, but then also the Pharisees. The Pharisees had this ultimate idea of who God was. They understood his identity. They had all of the Old Testament, the covenant, the laws, the stories to say, this is God's character. They had a purpose. They knew that they were supposed to be a light to the nations, to kind of model this character to everyone else in the world, but they practiced with AI too. For them, the law was an artificial connection with God and with other people. We see this, right? Any kind of aspect of your relationship with God, if it's self-seeking and then allows you to compare yourself to other people, then it's disruptive and it isolates you from community. That's what the Pharisees did. Now let's look at the prophets. They also had this category of who God is, his character, what the purpose was for their faith and the world around them. Yet, for them, the law was a source of correction. It drew them into humility to connect with God and with other people. What they said is, we'll look at this law, and I'm going to ask how I'm going to change my behavior. At least a temptation for me is, when we talk about things like technology, screens, phones, switches, PS5s, whatever it is, the temptation is thinking that I own this, but so many of my habits and practices are saying that it owns me, that it rules my time, my attention, the grace that I allow for myself and for other people. And so a lot of statistics currently are being done for teenagers and how they interact with their phones, but really I think it's because they're more honest and transparent. Because a lot of the statistics that we're about to go over are kind of bleeding into people my age, which I just call adult. I feel like whenever you turn 30 and you're in your 30s, you're not a young adult anymore, you're just adult. And then you become senior adult, I don't know, 60s, whenever you can get cheap pancakes at IHOP. But these statistics are starting to be revealed in the rest of our lives as well. Hit it. I want you to be thinking about these results and how they're not just a correlation, but people are starting to realize that they're a causation as well. And so you can't read all the labels or see all the years, but essentially this is the sharp increase that we're seeing in symptoms of depression for US teens. And if you're astute enough, you know that a lot of that is due to technology, social media, everything like that. And then COVID hits, it spikes, and then it starts tapering off a little bit, which is saying that we should celebrate the work that's being done with understanding the impacts of depression and then being in a better mental place since COVID. You guys are doing a great job at being community. Congratulations. Here's some more of the impacts, though. Next, we have percent of US teens who get together with their friends almost every day. That's decreasing with the use of technology. Sharply, I might add, that it requires less of me, less gas, resources, maybe even risk, to be in person with people, or ask them to coffee, or say, I want to go catch a movie with you, instead of just being in my room and connecting with you over Snapchat or Instagram or messaging. But, like, as adults, we've been modeling that in an improper way too. I mean, for how many of us do we feel insecure or lost when we can't track our students or our kids on Life 360 or Find My Friends? We've had plenty of high schoolers and then alumni say, I feel incomplete or insecure, or I don't know what a relationship is with a close friend of mine if I can't track them in their GPS. Or I just don't know what a friendship is like if I have an unread message from them, or they ghosted me, or I break a streak on Snapchat by sending them pictures. Man, that reveals so much about our insecurities and how tech is defining our relationships and our friendships with other people instead of God or being faithful or, I don't know, acting outside of my comfort zone. Last one, and I think it's the one that I kind of want to, strike you with the hardest. It's the percent of US teens who get at least 7 hours of sleep on most nights. And it goes down with technology, even through COVID and after COVID, where you were supposed to have more free time. It dropped less and less and less. And so many people are becoming more radical about this idea of sleep because some people who are in the sports industry will say that if sleep was a drug that you could just like put into a capsule and share with people, it would be banned in the sports world because it's just that important to you, your mental health, your spirituality, your daily functions in life. Not just saying that tech is an idol, but the way that it's disrupting us has way more ramifications than just you're not getting your work done. Quick story. Yesterday, my daughter, Ember, and I were watching movies. Like, we love watching movies. We love watching college football. And she knows one word for football or what it's related to. She just says, touchdown. And actually, she's still working on her syllables, so it's like, touchdown. And she'll always say it for the wrong team, which I'm like, discipling her very gently. No, don't. Not yet. But in the moment, like Jeremy said, I was thinking, how am I discipling her in this moment? What is she realizing about us and our patterns of life or how we interact with screens, about what's valuable to the freest family or to Christians, or how little moments show what's valuable to us? You've been in that situation, right? Where your phone dings, your watch vibrates, and you're almost on call, beck and call, to whatever device that you have. I think if we're honest with ourselves, tech or anything distract us from our relationships and from our time is an idol. Teens are addicted to technology, and they know it. They'll be the first to tell you that all of their friends are on technology all the time, and I'm addicted to it too. What do I do? Correct me if I'm wrong. And then everyone else is addicted, and we think we're above it. We didn't grow up with smartphones. We didn't grow up with social media, and so I have the power to quit whenever I want, are the last famous words of anyone who's addicted. In front of the TV or news or football, sports for hours upon the week. We're just addicted, but the language may look a little bit different. I asked all different ages throughout the congregation of their experiences with technology, some of the ways that it allows them to connect with other people, but then also the ways that it makes them disconnected. One of our teens said, I think one of the ways it is more of a negative influence is that it is a huge distraction. It's always buzzing and lighting up, which is a built-in temptation whenever you are trying to focus. One of our parents said, God made us to be social creatures, but our phones are taking us out of that and making us silent and reserved in person. All across the board, adults said something similar to the effect of, it is efficient, but not personal. I can say more that this is one of the biggest temptations that adults have with technology. That's not an idol because it's for my job. It's not an idol because I'm doing something useful with it. No, we're just as addicted as anyone else. And so I think an idol is anything that has the power to distract you. Again, if anything has the opportunity to make you look away or disengage from a conversation at any moment, then that's your idol. And not to say that you should feel guilty about it, but I think we should be more comfortable with the fact that we need to confess in the small and most significant ways. I think confession is a practice that we just don't tangibly practice as much as we should as Christians. And so how do we have the posture more of a prophet, of disengaging and saying, these are the ways that I need to change with my relationship with technology, than assuming that I'm above it? A resource that we shared with our families recently was this book called 10 Rules for Raising Kids in a High-Tech World by Jean Twenge. And Jean Twenge is not a faith-inspired author. In fact, she's very secular, but she's a sociologist that talks about the relationship that we have to technology. And she coined the term iGen, as Generation Z, as the first generation to grow up with smartphones and with social media from elementary, middle, and high school. And so I'm going to modify some of these rules. I'm going to give you 5, and I hope one just really stands out to you, because this is going to get very practical, but I want one to ruffle your feathers in the way that you practice creating some margin of attention for yourself or with your family. 1, you're in charge. You own your device, or the device that your student has. You have the opportunity and responsibility to change your relationship with a device. Your tech should work for you, not the other way around. There's some freedom, but there's also responsibility in the way that you govern your technology. Rule 2, no social media until age 16, invest in in-person relationships and accountability. Jean would say that you shouldn't have social media until age 16 or later, which I know is a bit radical, but I think it's important to think about through the lens of how we disciple ourselves and for other people. Another good question for this would be, what would it look like for you to emphasize in-person relationships? We should celebrate things like streaming online or many of the resources that we have, but remember and keep in mind what the greatest goal is. Social media should be used sparingly and mindfully. I know that as I intentionally look for ways that I can be purpose-filled with my technology, the less I am on social media. The more texts that I'm sending for encouragements or for prayers keeps me away from Instagram and Snapchat just because that's not my focus. Rule 3, tech freedom should be consistent with maturity. And so Gene would say, at least for parents, give the first smartphone with a driver's license. The amount of teens getting driver's license is actually plummeting because sometimes, for many of us, technology is the greatest milestone that we give to people. But for adults, we should also acknowledge that maturity should be consistent with the amount of technology that we use. If we're addicted to being on social media and arguing about politics, about sports, or, let's rip the Band-Aid off, using pornography, then maybe we shouldn't have the freedom of technology or social media. Rule 4, emphasize guardrails and healthy limits. I love the idea of using tools and boundaries. Our youth staff one year downloaded the minimalist screen apps or limiting the amount of hours that you can be on social media. And that sounds really corny, but if you're tempted to spend hours into technology, put simple physical guardrails in your life or tell somebody else. That way they can hold you accountable to it. Rule 5, create no phone zones. This is the last one, but I think it's one of the most practical ones. Keep technology out of places and times meant for rest or connection with others or renewal. Jean is huge on the amount of sleep that we get as a culture. And she says, don't have a phone in your bedroom at all. 1/4 to 1/3 of teens and young adults will confess that they're on their phone from 12 a.m. to 5 a.m. because it's just there. In the middle of the night, they'll check it, and it will disrupt their sleep. I think as a Christian, fellowship, maybe some of the radical ways that we can be different from the world is our use of technology, but then also the amount of sleep and rest that we get. What intentional steps can you make to create more of this margin? As we end, I do want to celebrate some of the ways that our congregation is using technology in a very encouraging way. Some of our members had a very encouraging response of these are some of the tools that we use, and they ran it through AI. And so I thought this was a great summary. So there you go. There's your disclaimer about AI. Grok AI, with the wisdom of some of our human beings here, said that technology can serve as a gentle bridge in our spiritual lives, fostering connection without intrusion. One of its quiet gifts is the ability to send words of encouragement, comfort, or care through text or email. Messages that arrive not on our schedule, but on the recipient's. The sender is spared the worry of interrupting a busy moment, while the receiver is met with evidence of thoughtfulness, ready to be open when the heart is open. Grok/your community, which is great. Like Jeremy said, we have people that are tuning in online, and that's something that we should celebrate. Or messaging apps. The fact that you can message missionaries or members of the congregation is really important. We have a lot of our early bird congregation and fellowship meeting on Facebook on Wednesdays, and being able to stream on there is a huge encouragement. Things like podcasts of learning more about the Bible or theology has been a useful tool, not just for these people, but also for our senior members as well. In fact, one of our senior members said it allows them to see the Bible in different ways that they just haven't thought of in 40 years of attending church. Now, that member also said that their number one used app, over the course of the week, was the calculator. But I digress. And then also, just the fact that we have something called the Bible app, and it's downloaded on most, if not all, devices, and has been helpful in translating the Bible into almost every language in the world. Those are things that we can see as fruit of the Holy Spirit. Now, as we close, something that we always talk about and our students always mention is, how do we get more margin? And not even just margin from technology, but margin in the hurriedness, the pace of life. And I always think about this passage from Matthew 11, when Jesus talks about his yoke being light and his call being restful. What does it say about our culture that we don't use technology any differently than the rest of the world? And what if we took steps for that not to be the case? I think that would be very powerful for our Christian witness. So what I want you to do is take 2 or 3 deep breaths and just disconnect for a moment. I'm going to read this powerful call over you. Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." This is the gospel that so many of you, myself included, we rely on artificial means of connection. And the fact that Jesus showed up in the flesh to share meals, to do miracles, to party at weddings, to die and be resurrected on our behalf, God didn't settle for artificial with you. And so we're about to offer an invitation. We'll sing a song. We'll have shepherds and their wives in the parlor in the room behind me, behind the auditorium. But I want it to be a call to you, that if you feel disconnected, come forward. We'd love to pray for you. If you want to begin your Christian journey, we would love and celebrate you getting baptized. But I want you to be present in this next song and just meditate on how God's trying to connect with you and what your call is to connect with other people. Please stand as we sing.
Purer in heart.